guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this episode, I'm gonna be doing a part 2 episode to a video that I already talked about because it's been one of my most popular videos on my channel by far, where I talked about the differences in school between America and Sweden. I wanna keep this going because the last couple of weeks I've been thinking about that video I made, and as I've been working in a Swedish school here over the past 2 weeks, I've been thinking about things that I just left out of that first video that I think are really interesting points to talk about. So in this video, I'm going to be coming at you with some of those new points of how schools are different in America and Sweden. So I'm not going to waste your time. Let's jump right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about in this video is something they have here in Sweden called elevensval, which basically means student choice time. In my first school that I worked at, students could kind of use that time to do homework or research their own things and do independent study. But at the school that I'm working at now, because it is a sports themed school, every student chose a sport to participate in, and their elevensval time actually goes towards doing that sport, which I think is really, really cool. If I was going through the school system again, I would love to have been part of a sports school, being a sporty guy myself. So I think that's a really, really cool difference. In America, students do have a lot of choices in the types of things that they can do. For example, there's a lot of after-school activities, different clubs where students can pursue their own interests and be with other students that like to do their own thing, like whether it's a chess club, an after-school sport, is it a musical activity? There's tons of options for students to do, but those are primarily outside of school. Now, students can also choose certain types of classes in school that they want to do, which are called electives in America. Elective classes, which could be like wood shop, for example, or a lot of the music types of things are classes that students can actually take in school as electives. So those are some different ways. Both countries have choices for students of what they want to do, but they come out in very different ways, and the elevensval time in Sweden is built into the school day, which I think is really, really cool. The second thing I want to mention in this video is high school sports in America. Now, I absolutely love high school sports in America, and it's kind of a bummer that the sports here in Sweden are not as connected to the schools as much as they are in America. Going through high school in America, I was very, very into sports. I played 4 different sports in high school. I played golf, I did American football, I even did wrestling for a year, and of course my staple was soccer, and I pretty much did that my entire high school career. So I absolutely loved sports in school. My parents are both high school soccer coaches, and I go way more in depth about youth sports in America versus Sweden in another video. So I will link that one down below if you guys haven't seen it yet, because the differences are very different. I mostly elaborate on the high school sports that we have in America for all of my Swedish viewers that aren't familiar with that. So be sure to check that out if you haven't seen it yet, because I go way deeper into this topic on that video. Now, this next point I thought was a little bit weird when I first came to Sweden, but it actually didn't affect me at first, because the first school that I worked at, we had some British principals that were running the school, and we were an international school where we spoke English. And so the students were actually expected to call teachers by their last names, but this is not very Swedish at all. And in fact, at most Swedish schools, students call teachers by their first name, which took me as kind of odd at first, but now I actually kind of like it after having worked at a Swedish school these past few months. It is really interesting. The teacher-student relationship is a little bit less formal, and I actually think that students in America have just a bit more discipline than the students here in Sweden. So it's a really, really interesting difference, but I feel like you can have a really, really good relationship with the students when they can call you by your first name. So it is just different. I don't know if there is a right way or a wrong way to do that, but it is just a little bit weird to me still that I'm teaching a class and people will call me Stefan instead of Mr. Tyrone, but I've come to actually like it the longer I've worked here in Sweden. The next difference I want to talk about with American and Swedish schools are the ages and the things that happen, especially when it gets to the high school level. Now, high school in Sweden is actually known as gymnasium. I hope I'm saying that right. And basically gymnasium, from my understanding, lasts 3 years, whereas American high school lasts 4 years. And in America, for each grade level you are from 9 to 12, there is a different word for what grade you're in. So your first year of high school in America, we say freshman. That is when you're a ninth grader, basically. You can also be called a freshman. Your second year of high school, grade 10, is sophomore, grade 11 is junior, and grade 12 is senior. So if somebody says, I am a senior in high school, that means they're a 12th grader in their final year of high school. If somebody says they're a junior in high school, they are in their second to last year of high school, and they are in the 11th grade. And this is the same naming system that is used in American colleges. If you're in your first year of college, you would say freshman, and most college students go to college for 4 years, so the system is the same. Now, it's very, very interesting to me that at American colleges, the first 2 years of studying at those American colleges are basically just the general requirements in most cases, like the basic English, the basic math, the basic sciences, all the basic stuff, which they pretty much cover all of that basic stuff in the high schools here in Sweden. But in America, you don't actually really declare your major and focus on exactly what it is that you want to study until you get a little bit later in your college career. And then once you're in your third and fourth year of college in America, you are doing all the things pretty much specifically for the major that you choose. Whereas in Swedish college, you pretty much have to decide what you want to study before you even go to college. And in America, you can just go to college and be like, okay, I'm undecided. I'm going to just take some general classes, and then I don't have to decide for a year or two to figure out what I actually want to study, which is just kind of crazy for me that people would shell out insane amounts of money for college in America and not have a clue what they want to do. But that is the difference between college in America and Sweden. The college in Sweden is a bit shorter, but the students are working right away on the thing that they want to study. Now, this next point is really, really interesting to me, and it has to do with when there is a sick teacher or something at a school here in Sweden. Now, in America, when a teacher is sick or they can't make it or they're on vacation or they're gone for whatever reason, there will almost always be a substitute teacher, or they'll have other teachers cover. Now, in Sweden, this is mostly the case. We will have substitute teachers and we will have teachers cover other classes and things, but there are a lot of cases where if a teacher is gone in a Swedish school, they will just cancel the class, especially if it's like the last class of the day for the students. They'll go ahead and let those students go out early. And this is like way less common in America. Classes rarely get canceled unless it's like super snowy where I'm from, because then the buses can't actually get to school. So that is one reason why the classes just rarely get canceled. And I'm surprised teaching in Sweden how often classes do get canceled when a teacher is missing. Now, the next difference I want to talk about in American and Swedish schools is how the students actually get to school. Now, in America, the primary transportation for students, especially before they get their driver's licenses, is taking the school bus. Almost all of the students ride those big yellow buses that you Swedes have probably seen in the American movies and things. School buses is primarily what are used to take kids to and from school. So they'll all come in and drop off the students in the morning, and then they'll be waiting outside the school ready to take them home 10 minutes after the final bell rings, which that would not work at the schools here in Sweden because all the students are getting out at different times a lot of times. So I think that might be one reason why the school day in America starts and ends always at the same time, because the students rely on those buses to get them to and from school. Now, in Sweden, students will oftentimes take the public transportation, and they'll ride the same buses as everyone else in the general public or whatever public transportation is available to them. Some students will get rides with their parents, which is the same thing in America, but there are no school buses, at least from what I've seen here in Sweden. So that is something to keep in mind, how the students get to and from school. And the last thing that I want to talk about is student choice when it comes to what school to attend. Now, in Sweden, students get a lot of choice, or at least the students' parents get a lot of choice on what school the student actually chooses to attend, because there's a lot of different options usually, and the students can choose whichever school is the best fit for them. And if they don't like a school, then they'll just go ahead and transfer and find a different school. This is much less common in America, and while it is possible, usually you have to fill out a special form and get special boundary exceptions to go to a school that's not within your district, or you can choose to go to a private school as well. But in most cases, the school that you go to depends on your area that you live in. So all the people that live in one area really close to each other. They'll go to the neighborhood school that's close by at the elementary level, and then at the middle school there will be several different areas that are all closely grouped together that will all go to the middle school. And at the high schools, basically every high school covers a certain part of town or a certain area, and the student is pretty much going to go to that school. There are exceptions, like if I was really good at basketball, for example, and I wanted to go to a school that was good at basketball, I could get a special boundary exception and request to go and change schools. Now there are rules with the certain sports. Now, for example, in my situation, I knew that I was going to want to play varsity soccer in America. That means on the A team, basically, even as a freshman. And I was actually going to a middle school that was not in the district of the high school that I was going to go to. I was going to my neighborhood middle school, but I wanted to go to the high school where my parents taught and play on their soccer team, which I had grown up supporting my entire life. So in order to be eligible to play on the A team in my first year in high school, I basically had to transfer while I was still in middle school in my 8th grade year and go transfer to a different middle school so that I had been in that other school district for a year's time by the time soccer season came around that next spring. So there are special rules with boundary exceptions and things when it comes to sports. Otherwise, people would just transfer to whichever school was best every year, and there would be a lot of competitive disadvantages and things. So it is actually a really, really good rule when it comes to the boundary exceptions, and people in general just do not transfer schools as much in the States, at least from what I've seen here in Sweden. So with that being said, those are some more differences that I have noticed between the schools in America and Sweden. Now, if you think I missed something, be sure to go back and watch that other video, because I think I listed like 10 things in that video, and that should be really, really interesting for you guys who haven't seen it. If you were interested in some of these new things that I shared with you guys today, go ahead and leave a comment down below, whether you're living in America, Sweden, or anywhere else in the world. I'm really, really curious to see what you guys have to think. And also, with that being said, the schools within Sweden, there are a lot of differences. Just like in America, every school is going to be different. So if your school is one that doesn't follow the things a certain way, like I said in this video, leave a comment and say how your school is different. Basically everything I've talked about in this video is just based on the things that I've seen, but I know there are a ton of different ways that different schools do it, and I'm definitely interested to see how the other schools do it, because I've only been working at 2 different schools here in Sweden. So with that being said, if you found this video enjoyable, leave me a like and definitely subscribe, because I love comparing America and Sweden, and I've got a lot more content coming out shortly. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.